Hello, Podsters. Welcome to mid-December. I don't know about you, but I am feeling all the feels this holiday season. I have been having a great time, and I am super excited for the rest of the year and everything that comes with that. So this brings me to this week's topic, which is the last of the business-related topics we'll be discussing this year. So over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about changing the conversation to change your life. This week, we're going to talk about changing the conversation at work and how you are showing up for yourself, how you are inspiring inclusion with your colleagues, how you are throwing the rope down for the women that come behind you, and everything you can be doing to make sure that you are part of the solution at all times. I know you want to be. I know you are definitely speaking up for yourself. I know that you are helping other women. So this is a quick, down and dirty, I call it a ping pong episode because I'm kind of all over the place in this episode with a few actionable phrases, words, tools you can use to make sure that you are helping everyone, including yourself, to get their seat at the table. Next week, we're going to talk about changing the conversation at home because next week we're kind of rolling into the holidays, a lot more time at home. And then the following week, we're going to talk about how to change the conversation with yourself as we approach the pivotal, pinnacle, New Year's Eve. Who do I want to be? How do I show up? I'm going to spend some time here talking with you about how you're talking with yourself, how you're talking about yourself, and how you're talking to yourself. The reason why I am doing a 3-part episode on changing the conversation is because my new book is coming out. It's coming out in Q1, and I want to get some feedback from you as to what resonates, what you like, what you want to hear more about. So if you're listening on Spotify, also known as Spotify, I'm going to add a question that asks you what you're thinking about these topics and what else you want to hear about. If you are watching on YouTube, you can leave a note in the comments. And if you are listening on Apple, well, that's a work in progress. We're going to figure out how we can interact with you better on Apple. In the meantime, keep the DMs coming. There's nothing I love more than when someone I don't know pops into my DMs, or someone I do know, and tells me about an episode that resonated with them. It absolutely brings me so much joy. So please shoot me a DM, send me a note, make a smoke signal, fly an airplane banner, whatever you need to do. Let me know how you're doing. And with that, let's do this. Are you ready to speak up, stand out, and get your seat at the table? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast where you'll get real-life anecdotes and actionable tools for you to step into your strengths, debunk imposter syndrome, truly know your worth, and show up like you own the room every time. I'm your host, Nancy Medoff, who did the thing and followed my passion for empowering women like you to unleash that inner spark and become who you know you are meant to be. I'm a diehard foodie with a raging Skittles habit who will not stop until women everywhere unmute themselves and truly thrive at work, at home, or wherever you may be. Let's do this. Hello, Podsters. Here's what's up. You might hear a little bit of an echo because here's what's happening. In true December form, I went to record the podcast yesterday, this podcast, and it took 40 minutes for my computer to finally tell me this is not happening for you today, Nancy. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break, walk away, try it again tomorrow. Came back Saturday morning, super pumped to record it. And again, I'm having all kinds of tech issues. So I am recording this from my phone. That is how much I am committed to this episode because I think it's really important. So thank you for your patience with the sound. And we are going to get going, and we are going to talk about how changing the conversation will change your life. So here's why I want to talk about this. This is probably going to be my last businessy topic of the year. I like to record the podcast with what's top of mind for me. And right now, I'm kind of 50% checked out of business right now, which I am super happy about because that's how I set up my year. I set up my year so that around like mid-December, I could just shut it down and let my business run for me. I have an amazing support team, and I didn't leave corporate to grind during the month of December. So as you're listening to the podcast, I'm trying to take it easy. That being said, there's a couple of things happening. One, My new book is coming out soon. I don't know when because I haven't written it yet, but it's going to come out in first quarter. Ideally, it's going to come out probably second week in January. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can get yourself on the wait list. The book is when it gets published. The book is called Change the Conversation, Change Your Life. And I'm very passionate about this because as one of my diehard podsters, what you say, how you say it, what you say to your work people, what you say to your family and your loved ones, and what you say to yourself significantly impacts your life. And I'm really passionate about this. So while I still have this top of mind and while I still have a fire in my belly about it, I want to talk to you about it here on the podcast, and I'm going to bang out this book. So get on the wait list if this is something that interests you. I'm probably going to be giving away copies. I'm going to be looking for a street team, people to help me promote it. So whatever floats your boat, get on that list. So by the way, if you're watching this, I don't know if you can watch this on YouTube. I don't know if you're watching this on YouTube. You can watch this on YouTube. And it's kind of cool because you can put comments in and we can kind of have a dialogue about some of what we talk about. You will see that I have a giant fluffy scarf on right now. So for those of you who are in Dubai and Brazil and Argentina and all those fabulous warm places, it's about 29 degrees Fahrenheit here today. And that's cold. And no matter what I do in my home, I can't keep warm. In fact, this is so funny. We're so conditioned. I asked Alexa what the temperature is. And he said, my Alexa's a man, by the way. We can talk about the psychology behind that later. But I get to bark commands to Alexa. And he came back and said, it's 29 degrees. And I said out loud, well, that's not too bad. This is how much we condition ourselves. Anyway, it's freezing. I have a scarf on. Let's get to it. So changing the conversation, and why this came up and why I wanted to record this is the theme for International Women's Day just came out. Now, International Women's Day is my Super Bowl. It is the 1 week of the year where I am on it, on stage, on video, on my game, at the top of my game for a whole week. Many of you and I got together last International Women's Day, either in person or on video. I absolutely love it. This is what drives me. I love, 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 love this event. So the theme came out and it's inspiring inclusion. That's the theme. And that got me thinking about inclusion and how we sometimes get in our own way of being included. So I want to talk about inspiring inclusion or changing the conversation in this context at work. Next week, I'm going to talk about changing the conversation at home. And then the third episode is going to be about changing the conversation with yourself. And the timing is great because we're still kind of in business mode. You're going to be airing this. This is going to be being aired December 12th. So we're still working. The following week is the 19th. We're kind of checking out a little bit and focusing on the holiday with our friends. And then after that, we're into the end of the year and the new year. And that's where I really want to talk about changing the conversation with yourself. I have a all-star lineup in January. We have experts. I've already interviewed them. Some of them I'm interviewing next week. We're going to talk about how to get your financial house in order. We're going to talk about your subconscious mind and how you can get it to work for you. I have seen this. I've done it. I'm living it. I can't wait for this episode. So I'm bringing back Brenda Johnston. She was my number 2 episode of the year in 2023. And she is a subconscious mindset strategist. She's going to talk about how to get your subconscious mind to do the work for you. It sounds woo-woo. I can tell you it is not. It works. I'm living proof. And I'm not going to spoil it by telling you about all the amazing outcomes that I've experienced. I'm going to make you wait for it. That's going to come out in January. So let's jump in. I want to talk about changing the conversation and how you can make sure you are included. So I want to talk about the situations where you are not included and you're not included. Let's say it's an event. Let's say it's a conversation or a discussion. Let's say it is a connection or an introduction. You cannot let these microaggressions or into unintentional slights, right? It could be purposeful. It could not be purposeful. It doesn't matter. You have to address it. You have to address it. You cannot be passive aggressive about it like I have been many times in the past. You or we can't just let it go and say maybe it was unintentional. It doesn't matter if it's unintentional. The more you let it go, the more it's going to happen. So you can't inspire inclusion and if you're not addressing it and if you're not doing it yourself. So let's take an example of one of my favorites. It's when something happens and you are not included in a conversation. And it doesn't matter if it's male or female. So there's a few ways you can address that. Here's how you can do it. So let's say that there's a meeting that's scheduled on the books and you're not included in the meeting for whatever reason, and you find out ahead of time, right? Doesn't matter what the person's intent was. You need to address it. It could be something as simple as, I'd like to make sure I'm included in that meeting. Or, hey, Mike, I'd like to make sure I'm included in the meeting. Oh, well, we already scheduled it. I understand. Here are the times I'm available. Let me know which of these times works for you. What you need to do is make sure that you're not then taking the ball and saying, oh, I'll reschedule the meeting. This used to happen to me all the time. People would schedule meetings when they knew I wasn't available. It was probably because I was so overcommitted that I was just never available. And I would say, I totally understand. I know it's an inconvenience. Thank you for rescheduling at a time I can attend. It could be something as simple as, I remember years ago, I was at a golf tournament, or I was going to a golf tournament. This is many, many years ago. And there was a foursome already committed. And they said, well, you can just drive the cart. You can imagine how that went over. I said very nicely, I said, no, I'm not driving the cart. I'd like to be a part of the foursome. Well, we're going to have to split the foursome. Okay. Let me know if you need help rounding up another 3 to join the second foursome. Like, I'm not driving the cart. It could be something as simple as, if there's a conversation that's repeatedly happening in your area of expertise, could be something as simple as, I'd prefer, if you're going to be discussing this, that I'm part of the conversation. Or I'd prefer, and that can be a little dicey, right? Like, of course, someone can have a conversation, but I'd prefer if you're going to be discussing whatever it is, that I'm a part of the discussion, particularly when decisions are being made. And again, I know this is not comfortable. And at the same time, this is the only way to make sure that we are included. Or let me rephrase, this is the best way to make sure that we're included. Like I said, it's uncomfortable. I can promise you're only going to have the conversation once. Okay. So let's say there's a bunch of guys at the office, and this happens a lot, particularly outside the US, and something's being scheduled and it's not something that a traditional female would do. So let's say, I don't know, they're going to a bourbon tasting, or they're going to a strip club. I mean, let's be honest, this still happens. I remember years ago, Carly Fiorina, if you don't know who she is, I think she was CEO of Compact. This is way back. She wrote a book, and it's an excellent book. And I remember in the book, she talked about she would, in Japan, go to strip clubs with the men in her office because that's where decisions were being made. Or relationships were being solidified or created. And while I applaud her courage and her tenacity, I would say now that she had the power, even though she was only in sales at the time, to say, that's not an appropriate venue for a client engagement. I know that myself and the other women on my team wouldn't be comfortable with that. Where else would you like to have it? Or come up with a suggestion. Again, this was many, many years ago. So I'm sure if that was an option, she probably would have done that. And I remember reading that and my heart breaking, because I'm like, wow, she has to go to a strip club to be a part of the conversation. Not okay. And we've made progress. We've made a lot of progress. And at the same time, this stuff is still happening. So perhaps if there's something that isn't something that you think women would want to attend, I'm not sure that activity will appeal to everyone. How about if we ask the group? There you go. How about if we ask the group? And the key here again is to stop there. It's not, how about if we ask the group, I'll go ahead and send out a survey. Nope. Not unless that's your role. If your role is to decide what the group wants to do, great. But I would argue you can say, I'm not sure that activity would appeal to everyone. Let's send out a survey to make sure that we're doing something that everybody actually wants to do. Who on your team is responsible for that? Or who's responsible for that? Do not take it on. So that's a little bit of how you can correct the behavior. My favorite, and I've had to do this many, many times. I do it in my personal life quite a bit. Let's say somebody says something that's offensive in a meeting, male or female. You don't need to be strident about it. You can simply pull them aside after and say, I know that you're a nice guy, and I know that you probably didn't intend for it to sound like this. Here's how I felt when you said this. Here's the thing about talking about your feelings. And this is a Powerful negotiation tactic. I use it all the time at work and at home. I use it with clients. I use it at home. What I say is, when you did this or when you said this, here's how I felt. Here's why this is so powerful, Podsters. You can't argue with how someone feels. Can't argue with how someone feels. It's how they feel. This is a very powerful negotiation tactic. When you offer me a salary increase of 2%, I feel like you don't value any of the contributions I've made. When you offer me a salary that's $10,000 less than my male colleagues, I feel like you don't value my contributions as much as you do theirs. When you ask that I take your phone call at 10 p.m. at night, when you know that that's the only time I have to myself, I feel like you don't value me and you don't value my personal life and my priorities. You cannot argue with how someone feels. This is incredibly powerful. I want to say particularly at home, but I think it's powerful anywhere. So that is what I would say is one of the number one negotiation tactics I can recommend is, here's what you did and here's how I felt as a result of it. They can't dismiss your feelings. They can say, well, that's not what I intended. I know that's not what you intended. That's why I'm bringing it to your attention. Or they can say, well, that you shouldn't feel that way. And we talked about that on a previous episode. You can't tell someone how they should feel. Again, I know that wasn't your intent. I'm telling you that this is how I felt. And I know that's not what you wanted to happen. So very, very powerful. So since I brought up salary, let's talk about salary. By the way, this is going to be what I call a ping pong episode because I'm so inspired and passionate about this. There's so many ways that you can make sure that you yourself are inspiring this inclusion. Let's say you negotiate this big salary increase. I'm not saying that you should then go to your female colleagues and say, hey, I just negotiated a massive salary increase. I'm saying the next time there's a conversation around money or salaries or your boss or the discussion, you can say something like, I'm not going to share the details. I think it's important that you know that I was able to negotiate an increase that I'm very comfortable with. That's all. That's all. I remember a few years ago, Brooke Baldwin, for those of you that watched or watch CNN, Brooke was an anchor for many, many years, and she has done a ton for women at work. And she shared her salary with her colleagues. Again, I'm not saying that will work for you. And she did so because she knew how much more she was making than some of the women in her company who were equally as qualified. She wanted to help level set the gender wage gap. Again, you need to do what's best for you in your environment with your company. I would say you can come out of a salary negotiation that was successful and say to your female colleagues, I did a lot of work and I prepared and I was able to negotiate a salary that I'm comfortable with. That's all you need to say. And I know many of you already do this. I would encourage those of you who don't maybe to take a look at why you're not doing it or how you can do it and how much it will help the women that come behind you. By the way, I have a ton of tools for this. I have a optimal salary calculator. I have how to build your personal board of directors. I have forensic networking. All of this helps you to level up your salary and level up your career and level up where you are in the gender wage gap. All of those are available as part of my confidence community. There's a link in the bio if you're not already a member. So let's talk about how you are being inclusive to other women in general, not necessarily as how it equates to your salary. When it's interesting. Unfortunately, many times there is a subtext of competition among women. And let me tell you who loves that. You know who loves that? The not as supportive men. And there's not a lot of them out there anymore, which is awesome. They're still out there. The people who love it when women don't support other women are the people who benefit from that. So there's an old saying, I think it was Madeleine Albright, who said there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. I don't love that saying because I think that has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. We've talked about it on this podcast. I talk about it a lot with my one-on-one clients. We have to stop saying this because we're giving it oxygen and we're giving it life. When you have your seat at the table, it is not optional. It is your job to make sure that you're building a bigger table. It is your job to look around the room. And if you see a woman hanging out in the background, to pull out a chair and say, hey, why don't you come sit here by me? It is your job to say to your boss or to the person planning the meeting, I see there are a lot of men on this panel. I love it. I love hearing from everybody. Let's make sure that we have an equal number of women. This is no longer optional. It's no longer optional. When you are invited to speak on a panel, it is no longer optional to say, I'd be thrilled to be a part of the panel. I see I'm one woman out of 7. What can we do to make sure there's more women on this panel before I commit? I've done that. And oftentimes it's a matter of, oh, we'd love to have more women. Do you have anybody you can recommend? That's a whole nother conversation. But that's part of making sure that you are inspiring inclusion. It is referring clients. I think my favorite person, as I mentioned, one of my favorite people, Brenda Johnson, she's coming on the podcast again. She and I do almost exactly the same thing. And we laugh about, she'll listen to one of my podcasts and she'll say, I just recorded the same thing. I'll listen to one of hers and I'll say, I can't even believe this. Go back to episode number, blah, blah, blah. I said the same exact thing. We help people the same way with the same message. And we support each other because we know that there is plenty to go around. And if what Brenda says and how she helps you with your career resonates with you, great. I think that's awesome. If you listen to my podcast, you like what she says and you like her style better than mine, great. I wasn't meant for you. It wasn't meant to be a one-on-one relationship with me and you. It was better suited for Brenda. And if you listen to Brenda and you think she's, you don't like her approach or her approach doesn't resonate as much with you, no problem. Come on over to me. I'll help you in a way that resonates with you, in a way that feels good to you. There is nothing I love more than promoting other women and their businesses, their services, even if they do the same things I do. We have to help each other. We have to inspire each other. A rising tide lifts all boats. If we can help each other get higher to where we need to be, we will all get there faster. We'll all get there less painfully, and we will all get there with joy and with thriving and with ease. Okay, so Podsters, as we go into the season of giving and the season of lifting each other up, I ask you to think about how you are showing up for yourself, how you're showing up for your family, which we'll talk about next week, and how you're showing up at work and what you're doing to bring the other women along and what you're doing to make sure that you have a seat at the table. I'm going to give you an example. And this is not self-serving. It might sound self-serving, but it's not. I have a dear friend and former colleague. She bought a bunch of books for the women in her office. She bought a bunch of my books. I said, ship them to me. I'll sign them. I will personally sign them. I'll add a personal note. And that is how she is lifting other women. She is giving them the tools. She is making sure that when she has her meetings, she's talking about, tell me about what's happening with you at home, not the specifics, but tell me about what's happening in your personal life and how we can make sure that you're thriving. Again, not the specifics, but she's creating an environment where people feel comfortable talking about all of themselves, not just work, not just the tasks that need to happen, not just what needs to get done. And as you are going into the season of self-reflection and the season of thinking about how you want to show up, I ask you to think about what are you doing to make sure that you're included in these conversations. So that, Podsters, is my last businessy message for you this year. As I said, next week, we're going to talk about how you're showing up in your personal life and how you are changing the conversation at home. I am really passionate about this. We love boundaries here. I love looking into my accountability and my self-accountability, particularly at home. And then we are going to roll into, like I said, how you're going to show up for yourself in the new year. I promise you, we have, as I mentioned, how to get your finances in order. I'm bringing in a business strategist to talk about the 12-week year and how to set up your year in 12-week increments. It's incredibly powerful. Brenda's coming back. She's going to talk about your subconscious mindset. So there have been a series of really odd, powerful, and appropriate things that have happened in December as a result of a session that I had with Brenda, because she knew she was coming back and she said, you can't talk about what I do unless we have a session together. So we did. And I have to tell you, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. I'm incredibly intrigued. I am loving how this is playing out. I am here for it and I can't wait to share it with you. So Podsters, have a great week. Let's see. What do I want to tell you? Speaker School is open. If you want to hone your skills as a speaker, this could be a podcast. If you have your own podcast and you want to improve how you're showing up there, if you want to take the stage and share your story, you know that there is nothing more powerful than that. If you want to be more persuasive in your communication, I have a speaker school program. It's a one-on-one mentorship. It's 3 sessions. It's quick. It's down and dirty. It's 3 weeks. You sign up in January, you're done, and you're done by the end of January. So that link is in the bio. And of course, I would love to work with you one-on-one. That is available too in the bio. I have 1 spot left in Q1, and I hope it's you. So enjoy, peace out, and I will see you next week with bells on. That's a wrap, Podsters. And before we go, I ask you, what's one thing from today's episode that you will use this week to unmute yourself? DM me, email me, send a smoke signal, whatever you need to do. Let me know what you're going to do differently. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and leave a 5-star review on Apple. This helps me spread our message of empowerment to more people worldwide. Let's do this.